So imagine driving through the small, quiet town of Weston, West Virginia. You pass some few houses as you follow the road that goes along the river. You see a few shops, and then suddenly, looming in the distance, there it is. A massive stone building that looks like something out of a Gothic novel. It is beautiful, but it does give you chills. That's the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Built back in the 1800s, this place was designed with the idea that fresh air and natural light could heal mental illness. It followed something called the Kirkbride Plan, and honestly, it really was ahead of its time in terms of architecture. But what went on inside? Not so beautiful. At its peak, this place was overcrowded, underfunded, and full of people that society didn't know what to do with. And then came the lobotomies. Yep. This was one of the places where the procedure really took off. They thought it was a miracle cure until antipsychotic medications like Thorazine came along and made it clear just how horrifying that miracle actually was. Fast forward to today, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is privately owned, and parts of it are being restored. You can take ghost tours, history tours, and even paranormal hunts. But no matter how much they clean it up, something about this place still feels off. Like the walls and the hand-cut stone foundation remembers what happened. And that's why when people talk about the creepiest places in the Appalachian Mountains, this one is at the top of the list. Welcome back to Sister Sharpens Sister. My name is Karen. You will see Delina in the green, Shalon in the black, and we have a special guest this evening, and that is my husband, Arnie. He is going to be with us for a portion of our episode today. And today, on our topic of We Are Appalachian, it's me in the driver's seat because we are talking things that are creepy. So I'm going to be looking at the screen up here at times so that I can see everybody's face. I'll be looking at the camera sometimes. And then I'm going to be looking over here at my other monitor so that I can read some stuff to you. Because my memory is not what it used to be. So what's the first creepy thing you think about when you think about Appalachian? Say the right thing. You're in West Virginia.
Yeah, I was going to say, even for mainstream, it's probably Mothman.
Mothman, yeah. That's the number one thing that pops up whenever you look up creepy things in Appalachian Mountains. Mothman. So I went to a site called thebluegrassstandard.com, and it's an article titled Storytelling in the Mountains, Cryptids Create Curious Tales. It's almost a tongue twister. And the image that they have up there is Mothman, the one that you typically see, which is the black figure with kind of fuzzy with the red eyes. And it says that Appalachian culture relies heavily on storytelling and sharing stories through oral traditions. And that, I want to mention briefly, goes back to the people that settled the Appalachian Mountains primarily. Do you know who?
Scotch and Irish.
Scotch and the Irish.
Yes. And they were called Scots-Irish because they were Scotsmen who had defected to that portion of Ireland out of English control. And that's why they became known as Scotch-Irish or Scots-Irish. Some people put a CH and some people do a TS on the end of that. But that's who primarily settled the Appalachian Mountains. You also have the influence of German settlers that came over, as well as some Englishmen and a few French. Not a lot, but a few. Mothman hits the top, number one, creepy cryptids of Appalachian Mountains. I mean, I love Mothman. Arnie and I have been to Point Pleasant. We've touched the butt.
She touched the butt.
Yes. And if you know,
Hmm.
you know. Point Pleasant is actually a really quaint town. It reminds me a whole lot of Mullins for some reason.
Okay.
If you take Mullins and Pineville and put them together, you've got Point Pleasant.
Okay.
And they've got a Mothman museum, and they have, oh gosh, what all is there, Arnie? There's a bunch
There's a
of
couple little
different
shops. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's several shops that are kind of in that cryptid theme. A lot of people take their theme, and because they're really catering to a lot of the people that are coming into town simply because of the history, simply because of the Mothman Museum. And so they play it up a lot with different cryptid theme, horror themed
Yeah.
items that they sell. They kind of play all into that, but then you see a lot of it is your typical small town. There's a coffee shop, restaurants. There's a very large and very nice flea market slash antique store. It's a nice little downtown strip, and it's very close to the river. So you really do get a nice little place to stop into, and especially to walk around. There's a lot to do.
Yeah. The next one that comes up is the Appalachian Bigfoot or Sasquatch. um, Shalon was just telling me over the weekend that one of the podcasts that we listen to called Blurry Creatures, they have a gentleman on there by the name of Timothy Alberino. He's an author, and he's not really an archaeologist because he doesn't have a degree in it, but he's got a whole lot of interest, and he travels the world and researches all this stuff really deeply. But he said that he was following closely two recent Bigfoot sightings. One, I think he said, was in Michigan, and the other one is in the state of West Virginia.
Timing is great because this weekend is West Virginia Bigfoot Festival.
Yes. Yes. And that is going to be Sutton. Is that where that's at?
Yes.
Yeah, that's in Sutton. You'll see there's a Bigfoot museum. There is the Flatwood Monster, which is next on the list. There's a museum for that there too. You know, a lot of people though think that the Flatwoods Monster was just a gimmick. It was something that they kind of got together and told everybody. You know, it was a made up thing, but it has carried through. That actually happened in 1952, really close to the time of the Roswell incident that happened in 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico. But UFOs and things like that were really, that was the hot topic. Another one is especially seen in the areas of Kentucky and Tennessee called the Wampus Beast. And that is a creature that is described as being half woman and half cat, or half woman and half dog. And it's supposed to let out eerie screams and has glowing eyes, and like the Mothman, is a harbinger of doom. Now, the next one is in actually Maryland, in the area around there. Now, a lot of people, when they start thinking Appalachian Mountains, they don't think Maryland. They think that's a little far north. But I will tell you, the Appalachian Mountains go through 16 or 17 different states, depending on how you rank it. And I'm going to list them off real quick: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia. Virginia, with the largest mileage of the Appalachian Trail, it's got a little over 500 miles in Virginia. Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and then it says in parentheses, small portions in Alabama and Kentucky. So the Appalachian Mountains go everywhere. But this one is called the Snallygaster. It's a creature that resembles a half bird, half reptile, has wings and a beak that is lined with sharp teeth, and tentacles or octopus-like appendages. Yeah. Why does it feel like it's easier to believe in something like Bigfoot or the Mothman than it is this snallygaster. This one preys on livestock and will attack humans by silently swooping from the sky to pick up and carry off its victims. I don't know hardly anything about that particular cryptid. And then there's something in West Virginia and Kentucky called the sheep squatch, which is a creature that will stand on its two back legs that looks like a mix between a sheep and a bear, with long, shaggy fur that's either white or gray. They have sharp teeth and red glowing eyes. And sightings of sheep squatch, it's hard for me to say, have been reported since the 1990s. And that leads into something that Arnie and I've talked about off and on, called help me out here, Arnie, Tulpa, Tulpa.
Yes.
Which is one of those things that will come into existence if enough people start talking about it and believing in it. Like Slender Man. Have you guys heard of Slender Man?
Mm-hmm.
Right. There was no such thing as Slender Man until the advent of the internet. And then what was that? Creepypasta. Right? Is that what it was on?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all these stories started happening on creepypasta, and then suddenly there is Slender Man. So that's kind of like what the sheep squatch is, except, this started happening in the 90s, well before the advent of Reddit. And that's just, a handful of things that have been seen in the Appalachian Mountains. But in my area, in Shalon's area now, one of the creepy things is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, or the West Virginia State Hospital, or what else was it called?
The Western State Hospital. And I believe at one point when it was first coming into existence and being planned by Virginia, because this was before the Civil War, it was the Western Virginia State Hospital.
Yes. Now, it's like Arnie just said, it started in,
1858.
1858 is when they first started building it. Now, here's one of the marvels of this massive, imposing structure. From one corner, like front on, the iconic image of Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, the clock tower, and then the two wings that go out, right? From one corner to the other corner is just a couple feet short of a quarter of a mile in length. They started building the hospital in 1858 and did not finish it until 1881. So that's like 23 years of construction. To this day, it is still level.
They did a good job then, didn't they?
They did a very good job. The hospital actually, while they were constructing it, they had to take a break. You want to guess what the break was?
War.
It was the Civil War. So they had to take a break for the Civil War. Anyway, the asylum, the architect was a gentleman by the name of Richard Andrews. And Richard Andrews relied heavily on the architecture of a physician by the name of Thomas Kirkbride. And Dr. Kirkbride came up with something called the Kirkbride Plan. He was a Quaker from Pennsylvania who in total helped design just a little over 70 insane asylums throughout the United States.
Wow.
It's 300 total buildings, hospitals,
Right.
asylums for the mentally ill, asylums for TB, things like that
Right.
were influenced by his ideology.
Correct. But he himself, just a little over 70, designed and saw made sure that the construction guys got the plans for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The Kirkbride Plan relied heavily on his belief that treating mental illness not only did you treat like the physical, like this is back in the days when they were like drilling holes in people's heads to release demons. He believed that a lot of people with mental health issues could be helped by clean air, getting enough sunlight, and having an environment that supported calmness and peace. So his plans, the long wings that you see in Trans-Allegheny, so like they go from right to left as you're looking at it, and then there are ones that go straight back. The whole construction of the building is designed so that there is a maximum amount of sunlight that comes into every space in that building.
It is built on an exact, at least as far as the main building is concerned, which is the one that we're talking about. It was built on an east-west standing. So one wing points directly east, one point directly west, so that what you would always get is you would always get through the day that you'd always get sunshine coming in through, well, I'm sorry, a north-south. So you'd always get that east-west morning. You'd have that coming up from the sun, and then you'd get it on the other side of the building, but it would always shine through. And that was the way that they designed it, so that there were a maximum number of windows, doors, so that you would always get that natural light. It was not a, I guess what you would think of as a lot of places being dank and dark and foreboding. It was meant to be light and
airy,
airy, and really reinforce that idea of a positive mental outlook.
Right. One of the other things about the design of the building is that if you go to this one particular spot on the second floor, and I've got a picture of it that I will put up on the screen right here as we're talking about it. The way that he designed this building, they believe he leaned heavily on construction that is seen in Europe, but the lighting of the building forms a perfect X on the floor in this one particular spot on the second floor. It's on the second floor for a reason, because if that X is ever gone, that means your building's not level anymore. I just thought that was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
The way that they figured that out and was able to. I think it's very, very bold and very just narcissistic to think that we in the 20th and the 21st century are the smartest people that have ever existed, because we have computers that do a whole lot of the work for us, and these guys were doing that with a compass and a plum. Not a plum that you eat, a plum that you hang from a string.
Yeah.
The central building, which is the main one that we're talking about, is constructed from hand-cut blue sandstone, and to this day it is recognized as being one of the largest hand-cut stone masonry buildings in the United States, and the second largest in the world after the Kremlin. Yeah. Even as Arnie and I were taking this tour, we were noticing that there were doors everywhere. There were doors that led outside. And that was on purpose. Some of the residents in Trans-Allegheny actually worked in town. They would get a release to go work in town. And there was this one guy. What was the story, Arnie, about the one guy that would go into town and sit at the corner of the bar?
He'd sit at the corner of the bar, and they would come get him for dinner.
Yeah.
And he would come back.
Yeah. He'd go have a beer, watch TV, talk to a few people, and then they went and got him when it was dinner time. Who would do that today, right? Now, when the building was designed and when it was finished, it was only supposed to have a maximum capacity of 250 patients.
That's like nothing.
Yeah.
Compared to the size of that place.
Yeah.
But in the 1950s, it housed over 2,400 patients.
Wow.
And there's only like 400 rooms, but some of those rooms were administrative, they were libraries, and they were housing for people that actually worked there.
Okay.
So, you know, when that started happening, things kind of went downhill. Patients got overlooked. They were underworked or overworked, understaffed, and underfunded. And stories started to come out of inhumane conditions, experimental treatments, and isolation rooms. And therein starts the reason why some of these creepy stories have started happening with the West Virginia State Hospital. The building itself in 1935 caught fire because of faulty electrical wiring. There were no deaths, but it did highlight the infrastructure issues caused by neglect and just the fact that they didn't have any money to keep up with regular repairs like you should. And sections of the building started to fall into disrepair. Now they have started doing, what'd you say that word was, Arnie?
They have been in the process for the last 18 years since it was bought. They've been in the process of renovation. And if you look at and you walk into the main front doors, what you will see is that the building there has been restored much to the way that it would have looked in the past. So they have much of the kind of that first part of the first floor on either side, as well as part of the second floor where they have renovated and restored what is the administrator's office. And they have what was, I guess, a medical room, pharmacy. They've got several different offices that are restored to what they would have looked like in use over the last, when the actual hospital was active.
Mm-hmm.
There are still, and they're in the process of still continuing to work on it, because once you get outside of that main section on the first floor and the second floor, what you will see is that it is still in a state of decay.
Feeling pain.
They've tried to clean it up a lot, which is to remove anything that would be hazardous to people going through the building. But you can see in those areas of the first, second, third, and even fourth floor, you can see where paint is coming off, where the pieces of the ceiling have kind of started to move in. Bricks have started to move in some places, so that you can see that it has obviously been a significant amount of work has been done to try and get the building into a place where they can continue to show off and really continue to demonstrate this pretty fascinating piece of history.
Our tour guide, his name was Greg. He was absolutely fabulous, retired school teacher, and he taught history. So, he has a passion for this, right? And he actually has a condition where some of his vocal cord has been paralyzed. So he had this little speaker that was right here on his chest with a little microphone, so that when we were on the tour, that everybody could hear him. And I thought that just kind of added to the fun,
Mm-hmm.
The hospital did not actually stop functioning as a hospital until 1994.
Wow.
Yeah. The first lobotomy. I've got pictures. I don't know. I'll have to check like YouTube guidelines to see if I can actually put them in. If not, I'll put them on our Instagram page, and you can go to Instagram and look at them. But he did. Do you remember how many Greg said that was done there? 70 something?
No, it's just a lot, and the inmates knew when the doctor that was performing them would come because they would all pretty much run scared.
Yeah. They said that if one patient saw his RV pull into the parking lot, because this doctor would travel around and do these lobotomies, so he traveled in an RV. His RV would pull into the parking lot, and the word would go out that Ice Pick Harry was on the premises, and the patients would scatter. There's also a story of I want to say young man, I don't know if it was a boy, who was taken into the room. Arnie, do you remember how old that person was? A young man who was acting out. So they sent all the patients into the rooms and shut the doors. When you shut the doors at this time would be locked. They took this young man into another room, and you can imagine what was going on in there, but apparently he outlasted the superintendent that was administering discipline. So they called in more staff, and more discipline was heard, the screaming and the yelling, and then it got quiet. And then the patients heard a gurney, and then they were let out of the rooms after the gurney went on down the hallway. And they said that person was never seen again. And that's just one instance where patients had that story, but the staff all had a completely separate story that was identical. So there's no documentation to prove it. But when you have those stories that are like that are consistent, especially ones that are identical, they also had a children's ward. And we were going through, and I can't tell you how many pictures I took. I can't count them. I lose count. I took a picture of almost everything in this building. But he said you can go by the room, you can stop and take a picture, but you can't go in, because it was a room filled with trigger objects that's used for paranormal investigation. And they were kids' toys. And this was on a kids' ward. One of the spirits that supposedly lingers at the hospital is that of a young girl by the name of Lily, who is thought to have been born at the asylum. Think about that.
Yeah. So her mother was pregnant with her when she was put in the asylum, or something happened while she was in the asylum.
Or something happened while she was in the asylum. So
Yeah,
the thing that happened, if you were born in the asylum, you had an absent father and a mentally incompetent mother, you became a ward of the state. At the time, there was not really a whole lot of money for education. Any type of education that these children got was from the staff or from other patients who happened to know a little bit and were able to communicate that. So when they turned 18, they couldn't just open up the door and kick them out. They couldn't get a job. They couldn't read. They couldn't write. So they became wards of the state as an adult. And he has a story of a lady that was in his church, Greg's church, who was the nicest lady. She could play piano, and she would do that sometimes at church as a substitute piano player for the service. And she lived in town. She walked everywhere, or she would get a ride with somebody. And when she passed away, they couldn't find any family. And come to find out, she had been born at the hospital and had been awarded the state.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that's sad.
It is sad.
That's sad. There was one story of a gentleman who I think is still alive, who came into the hospital when he was 12, was released when he was 18. He called him the dump truck guy. Is that what he called him?
I don't remember that.
Yeah. But that's his job now. He drives around and I'm pretty sure he called him the dump truck guy. You were not allowed to record the tours. So, and I didn't write anything down. I was too busy taking pictures. But yeah, and he said, we get a lot of history from this guy because he was here when it was in operation. One of the other spirits that they talk about is a spirit by the name of Ruth, who apparently hated men when she was alive. And it is said that she will throw things and scratch any men who come around her room. And then our tour guide Greg, had a photo on his phone. And if it turns out, I took a picture of the picture that was on his phone. I'll try to put it up here. He caught standing in the doorway on was that the 4th floor, Arnie? Yes. Yeah, because we kept going up. Yeah. A shadow figure, I got chills, y'all. I got chills. Shadow figure of a man standing in a doorway with like a bowler hat on. You can see that he's wearing a jacket, tall gentleman, and they think it is a guy by the name of Sergeant Jasper Wyatt, who served during the Civil War. Now, when we were walking around taking pictures, they've got several rooms on the 1st floor labeled as just museum rooms. And in one of the rooms was, for effect, I'm sure, but to show you what type of coffin people were buried in at the time. There's a coffin. There are pictures of gravestones that they have found. There were 3 cemeteries on site. And this gentleman was buried in the oldest cemetery on the grounds by the name of Jasper Wyatt, who was born in June of 1822. He is documented to have stood 5 foot tall, blue eyes, light hair, fair skin. He was a farmer with 7 kids. In 1861, he enlisted to the Civil War and served until 1863. Was discharged in 1863. After just a few months, he re-enlisted. That's when he became a sergeant. And then he was discharged again at the end of the war. Now, sometime between 1880 and 1887, he was sent to the West Virginia Hospital for the Insane in Weston, West Virginia, where just 20 years earlier, he had been serving in the 6th West Virginia Infantry near the grounds of the hospital. There were 2 skirmishes that happened that he was involved in near this hospital. He died in 1887, and his body was laid to rest in Cemetery 1, which is on a piece of farmland directly behind the hospital itself. The Lewis County Death Register lists his cause of death as exhaustion from senile dementia. One of the problems with these cemeteries on site is something about the fence line. What was it?
There were 3 cemeteries that they know of for sure that are on the grounds there. They have basically lost track of exactly where they are. And an awful lot of them do not have markers, or the markers are underground, they're under the dirt or under the soil, under the grass. And they know that at least when they were originally set up, they were sited along the lines of the fence that ran around the grounds. The problem is that over time they have two different issues going on. One, the fences were replaced with newer fences, and they were not put along the same lines, which means you can't sight from that to figure out where that actual graveyard is. And secondly, they believe, they don't know for sure, but it's possible that one of the groundskeepers at some point moved headstones, because basically many of the stones were simply uh,
Just a marker.
carved in a top with a number. And then that number corresponded to a file inside the hospital that would tell you who that person was. They believe that for, I guess, sake of expedience, he moved the headstones, and now it just was easier to mow and keep clean, and therefore they don't know where they go back.
Yeah. But they are continually trying to find these graves. And the markers for those that had just numbers across the top, they were probably 12 to 14 inches wide, like wide. They were about this thick, so that's 5 inches or so, and they were about 2 feet long, Arnie.
Yeah, right in there.
Yeah, about 2 feet long, and they had 8 or 10 of them inside this same room where I took a picture of Sergeant Wyatt's information, just setting up against the wall. One of the fascinating things with our phones nowadays is that when you take a picture and then you take another picture and you swipe, it will do motion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You guys know that?
Mm-hmm.
Arnie has a picture that he took that when you swipe, it actually looks like there is a short figure walking into one of the rooms. Could it be artifact from the AI generated fill in the blank for that? Maybe. But it's enough to give you chills, especially when you are standing in one of the museum rooms at this place looking at said photo. And then let me start out by saying that they have two really good sized rooms with artwork from the people who were patients at this hospital. And now bear in mind, the lifespan of Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum started when care for mental health was putting people like in a literal cage. I'll put a picture of that up here too. Shackling people to the walls and drilling holes in people's heads, right? Then it phased into the more gentle kind of treatment and art therapy and craft therapy. Well, they had everything. There were drawings. There was this one person drew a picture of Jesus. What else was it? There was pottery. They had
Sculpture.
a kiln that they would fire their pottery in. But one of the things that fascinated me was that they did masks. Now, the outside of the mask is what like you guys would see of me, right? But on the inside of the mask, they would write or draw or use color to make representation of how they felt on the inside. These masks, there were two huge, what were they, Arnie? 12 foot by?
Probably 12 by, because there were what, four shelves?
Yeah, 4
Each,
shelves.
so probably like 12 by 4 foot tall, 5 foot tall, somewhere right in there, and about 4 inches thick. And then they had glass front and back. So you could walk around the front and you could see the mask itself as they had created it. And then you could walk around behind it and you could see what they had put on the inside. So you could see both sides. And there were two big racks kind of hanging side by side. They were suspended from the ceiling on top, and then they were anchored to the floor at the bottom, holding probably every foot or so, every 8 inches had a mask and mask and mask and mask. And they had a fairly large collection of them.
Yeah. I was videoing the backside of these masks. Y'all. There was no air conditioning running. There were no open windows. I was the only person in the room. There were people in there before me, but they had left. And I was about 3 feet away from this display. And I was using the zoom function on my camera. I was going through, taking video of these masks. And I stopped looking at the camera and I look up because this display case is weaving. It's swaying. I got chills thinking about it. Could it have been something in the environment? Absolutely. Absolutely, it could have been. But there was no airflow. There was nobody else in the room. It was anchored top and bottom. And I got it on video. It's moving. If I haven't said it before, Arnie, this was the best birthday present ever. They do a number of different tours at this place. You can do a nighttime tour, which that's the next one that I want to do, is the one where you're there all night. They take you to each wing of the hospital, and they will even take you to different buildings in the of the grounds, because at one time there were how many?
They believe there was 100 buildings, because the focus for many people is that there's the main building, because that's the iconic picture. That is what you see on their website. But the entire complex was really designed to be, by the time they added things in, to be self-sufficient. So there was a bakery, there was a dairy, there was a tailor shop, there was a metal shop, woodworking shop. There were coal mines. There was a power plant. They had originally designed, they had and again, I hate to say this, but there was the first building that was actually completed was a building to segregate the colored. So they put African Americans into that building as opposed to bringing them over into the main building. They had a separate building for the criminally insane. They had, so all of these things, anything primarily that they thought they might need on that complex, they built a building and they had it. And many of those buildings are still standing. Mm-hmm. So it is a significantly large complex.
Right. And our tour guide, Greg, told us that there were 9 acres of patient space. So, yeah. Okay. Anyway, the tours that they do. The next one that I want to do one of these days, please, is to be there all night. They put you in every wing. They will take you to separate buildings if that's what you want, but you are left by yourself or with a partner, with your equipment in a space for 90 minutes at a time. Yes, please. They do daytime ghost tours. They do history tours, and ours, since you've heard a combination of stuff, is what they call the VIP tour. There are only 2 tour guides on the payroll that are allowed to do those tours. And the other one is a lady, and I can't remember what he said her name was.
Yep.
But yeah, if you get the chance to go, book with Greg. I promise you, you will have a good time. He answered every question that we asked. He did not shy away from anything. No subject. He spoke freely about it.
The nice thing about the VIP tour is because what they have is they have history tours. The history tours, they will not discuss the paranormal.
Correct.
They won't talk about ghosts, hauntings, spook, specters, sightings, pictures, any of that. They will talk specifically about the history. The VIP tour is the only other outside of the actual ghost tours that they do at night where they talk about everything. They talk about the history, they talk about the grounds, they talk about, how it was built, architecture. They talk about the ghosts and the people and who they believe and what's been seen and, those kinds of things that have happened in different situations. So it's, to me, and to us, it was obviously one of the best values for the things that we were looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll provide links to all of the information and to the website, and I'm going to post a ton of pictures on the Instagram page. So, yeah. But yeah, and he talked about several of his own experiences that he's had, like hearing a ball bounce on a floor above him when it was just him and one other person in the building going through and locking everything up. He said you would hear it bounce. It sounded like a bowling ball. It was so heavy, and roll down the hallway, and you would hear footsteps go after it. After a couple of minutes, you would hear it down at the other end, and it would roll back down with more footsteps coming after it. I got chills again.
I got to confess something to you.
What?
Every time you say you got chills, I want to ask you if they're multiplying.
I got chills, they're multiplying.
I'm multiplying. Yes.
Are you losing control?
Yes. Arnie literally had to drag me out of this building. I mean, he didn't have his hands on me, but he was like, come on.
They really do a wonderful job. Their museum is really first rate because they have a lot of different information. They have a lot of, like the old different versions of the electroshock machine that they use for electroshock therapy. They have display of the tools for the lobotomies. They have the different nurses' uniforms that the staff would have worn. They have
farming implements.
They really have a lot of different information and a lot of different displays to look at. So, yes, we were there for a while.
Yeah.
Well worth the time and the effort to make it up there. And the money that comes in for renovation is only what they get from the tours, as well as what they do in October for the haunted house that they do on the grounds. So that's their income stream, that and the merchandise that they sell. So they really try to encourage people to come. And, we would definitely recommend that if you have the time and you can get to the area, it's fascinating. It really is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. This episode is going to sound like an ad for Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, but I'll tell you what, people, come to West Virginia. We have stuff. And I'll tell you what, you go to these small towns like this, you would not believe how many different coffee shops that were there.
Boring in small towns. You need a coffee, stay awake.
Is that what it is? Yeah. And I got stickers and a t-shirt, and we got a couple shot glasses. That's what we collect, is shot glasses. When we go places, we buy a shot glass. But yes, come to West Virginia. Be amazed. Do you guys have any questions about it? Now I'm the teacher, but whatever.
No, I think you did a good job explaining it and stuff. And I kind of know a little bit about it anyway, because I mean, I'm not from there, but I am from the Appalachian Mountains, so I do
Yeah.
know a little bit about it already. But yeah,
It's really fascinating. Really fascinating. I told Arnie, I said, the next time we go somewhere, instead of coffee shops, we're going to have to visit ice cream parlors. So we'll see.
Yes, dear.
yeah.
This episode will hopefully come out Monday or Tuesday. And if anybody's listening and you're close to Sutton, West Virginia, go to the Bigfoot Festival. There are going to be a lot of people there. I know that 2 or 3 guys from one of the shows that we like to watch, Mountain Monsters, is going to be there, right? So fingers crossed and weather permitting and everybody's in good health, then maybe we'll get to go.
My children are like, we're going to that, right? We're going to go to that.
It's awesome.
I don't think poor Tim has a choice.
He's outvoted.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's see. Next week is Shalon. Shalon, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'll focus on the coal mining and the logging and how it shaped lives.
Yeah.
Try to anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what we'll talk about next week. Arnie, thank you for stepping in and helping me remember some of this stuff that I hadn't written down.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. Talk to you in chat, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Love you.
Love you. You're supposed to do that so we know you're not frozen, Arnie. Wow, what a place. It is easy to get caught up in the ghost stories, and trust me, there are plenty of those. But what sticks with me most about the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is the history. The architecture was revolutionary. The intentions started out with hope, but over time, the overcrowding, lobotomies, the outdated ideas about mental health all became part of a much darker legacy. And now that history is just sitting there. It's silent, but it will speak to anyone that's willing to listen. Thanks for hanging out with us today on Sister Sharpens Sister. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to share it and leave a review. And if you're curious to see more behind the scenes, I'll be posting some photos from my VIP tour of the asylum over on our Instagram page. Just search at Sister Sharpens Sister. Next week, Shalon is taking the reins, diving into the roots of Appalachian life. She's going to talk coal mining, the lumber industry, sawmills, grist mills, and how all of it shaped the people and the culture of these mountains. That's one you don't want to miss.